It's a little after 1 in the morning on June 6, 1944. In England, 156,000 soldiers are boarding ships and aircraft for the largest amphibious invasion in human history. In Washington, Eisenhower has already given the order. In Berlin, Hitler is asleep. In a farmhouse east of the Orne River in Normandy, France, a German major named Hans von Luck is wide awake. And outside in the dark Norman sky above his position, he can hear them, the sound of engines, hundreds of them. A sound unlike anything the French night has produced in 4 years of German occupation. And then, the shapes. C-47 transport aircraft, barely visible against the overcast sky, an armada of them moving inland. And then the paratroopers. Hundreds of tiny figures descending on parachutes in the darkness beyond his perimeter. Von Luck has spent the entire war fighting in Poland, France, North Africa, the Eastern Front. He knows what a raid looks like, he knows what a reconnaissance drop looks like, he knows what a full-scale airborne assault looks like. And he knows with absolute certainty in this moment at 1 in the morning on June 6, 1944, that what he is looking at is none of those things. This is the invasion, the real one. The one they have been waiting for. He picks up the field telephone and calls his divisional commander. What happens next is one of the most consequential failures of command in the history of the Second World War. Before we get to that moment, let me tell you who Hans von Luck actually was. Because he isn't just a name in a footnote. He is one of the most remarkable figures to emerge from the German side of World War II, and his story illuminates everything that went wrong for Germany on D-Day in a way that no larger strategic analysis can. Hans Ulrich von Luck und Witten was born in 1911 into a Prussian military family, the kind of family that has served in Germany's armies for generations. Military service wasn't a career choice for people like him, it was a birthright and an expectation. He was trained in the old Prussian tradition: initiative, aggression, adaptability. The idea that a good officer improvises when circumstances change, that waiting for orders when the situation demands action is itself a form of failure. He joined the Wehrmacht and served under Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox himself, in the 7th Panzer Division during the lightning conquest of France in 1940. Rommel shaped von Luck's understanding of armored warfare, speed, surprise, and the relentless exploitation of any gap in the enemy's line. Don't wait to be told. See the opportunity, take it. Von Luck then went to the Eastern Front, saw the brutal grinding warfare of Russia, and then to North Africa, where he served again under Rommel in the Desert Campaign. He was captured briefly in the Western Desert and escaped. He fought in the retreat across North Africa. He saw the 21st Panzer Division destroyed at the surrender in Tunisia in 1943. By early 1944, a reconstituted 21st Panzer Division had been rebuilt in France. Von Luck was given command of its 125th Panzergrenadier Regiment and posted to Normandy, specifically to the area east of Caen, east of the Orne River. His sector, his responsibility, his regiment. And on the night of June 5, 1944, his regiment was conducting night training exercises, using blank ammunition, in the very fields where British paratroopers would begin landing just hours later. To understand why Germany was caught off guard on June 6, you have to understand the scale of the Allied deception operation that preceded it. For months before D-Day, British and American intelligence ran an operation called Operation Bodyguard, and it was one of the most sophisticated deception campaigns in the history of warfare. The Germans knew an invasion was coming. They had known since 1942. Hitler himself had ordered the construction of the Atlantic Wall, a massive network of fortifications stretching along the entire French coastline, precisely because he expected it. The question wasn't whether the Allies would invade, the question was where and when, and the Allies worked tirelessly to make Germany answer that question incorrectly. The primary deception was called Operation Fortitude. The Allies created an entirely fictional army group, the First United States Army Group, or FUSAG, supposedly massed in southeast England, directly across from the Pas-de-Calais. General George Patton, whom the Germans considered the most dangerous American commander, was publicly assigned to lead it. FUSAG didn't exist. There were fake radio transmissions, fake equipment visible from German reconnaissance aircraft, double agents feeding false intelligence to Germany. The message was consistent: the real invasion will come at Pas-de-Calais. Normandy is a feint. Don't move your reserves even if Normandy is attacked. The main blow is still coming at Calais. It worked perfectly. As late as the morning of June 6, as Allied soldiers were dying on Omaha Beach, senior German commanders were debating whether Normandy was a diversion. The powerful Panzer Reserve Division sat in place, waiting for an attack on the Pas-de-Calais that would never come. But von Luck wasn't confused. Von Luck was right there. And at 1 in the morning on June 6, he could see what was happening with his own eyes. Here is exactly what Major Hans von Luck experienced in the first hours of June 6, 1944, as he described it in his memoir Panzer Commander. Shortly after midnight, his men began reporting something unusual. The sound of aircraft, many more than normal. Then the reports started coming in from across his sector. Paratroopers, British paratroopers landing in large numbers east of the Orne River. On the west bank of the Orne, at a bridge the British would call Pegasus Bridge, a coup de main operation by British gliders had already succeeded in capturing the bridge intact. Simultaneously, one of von Luck's companies had the extraordinary experience of being in the middle of night training exercises with blank ammunition when actual British paratroopers began landing around them. They managed to capture a British medical officer who was attached to the 6th Airborne Division. And this captured officer, whether out of shock, confusion, or some other reason, revealed to his captors that this was the full Allied invasion. The main landing was coming at dawn, at the beaches. Von Luck had British paratroopers in his sector. He had a captured Allied officer confirming the invasion. He had his own eyes and ears telling him that the scale of what was happening was unlike any raid or reconnaissance operation. He picked up the phone and called General Edgar Feuchtinger, commander of the 21st Panzer Division. Feuchtinger was not at his headquarters. He was in Paris, attending a party. Von Luck called the divisional operations officer instead. He requested permission to counterattack immediately, to hit the British paratroopers before they could consolidate their bridgehead on the east bank of the Orne. Before they could secure Pegasus Bridge and create a protected corridor for the main invasion force. The answer was no. Strict orders were in place. The division was not to engage in major operations without clearance from higher command. And higher command, all the way up the chain, was locked in the same paralysis that gripped the entire German military that night. The story of why Germany couldn't respond in the first critical hours of D-Day is a story about a command system that had been so centralized by Hitler's personal control that it couldn't function when it needed to most. The Panzer Reserve Divisions, the most powerful German armored forces in France, were held under Hitler's personal command. Not Rommel's command, not Rundstedt's command, Hitler's. And they could not be released for combat without Hitler's personal authorization. On the night of June 5-6, Hitler was at the Berghof, his Alpine retreat. He had taken a sedative and gone to bed. His staff had standing orders, explicit, non-negotiable orders, that he was not to be woken under any circumstances short of a catastrophic emergency. Now you might think Allied paratroopers landing in Normandy and the largest naval armada in history appearing off the French coast qualifies as a catastrophic emergency. His staff thought otherwise. Or rather, they had been conditioned by years of Hitler's explosive rage at being disturbed to be very, very cautious about waking him. Hitler was not woken until well into the morning of June 6. By that point, Allied soldiers had been on the beaches for hours. And then, when he was finally briefed, Hitler made a decision that seems inexplicable in hindsight. He still believed the Normandy landings might be a feint. That the real invasion was still coming at Calais. He refused to release the Panzer reserves immediately. He wanted to wait and see. By the time the Panzer Reserve Divisions were finally released that afternoon, the window had closed. The Allies had established their beachhead. The worst crisis of the first hours, when they were most vulnerable. When a concentrated armored counterattack might actually have thrown them back into the sea, had passed without a serious German armored response. For von Luck, sitting east of the Orne with his regiment, watching the British paratroopers consolidate their position and knowing exactly what was happening on the beaches to the west. This was an agony of professional frustration. At approximately 4:30 in the morning, the 21st Panzer Division finally received orders to move, but the orders were confused, contradictory, and kept changing. General Feuchtinger returned from Paris. The division began to organize a response. But the orders that came down left von Luck's regiment specifically excluded from the initial counterattack thrust. The main armored elements were directed north toward the coast, while von Luck remained east of the Orne dealing with the British paratroopers. This matters enormously. The 21st Panzer was the only armored division actually positioned near the beaches on D-Day. Every other Panzer division was further inland, held back by the command system. The 21st Panzer was theoretically capable of reaching the beaches, and if it had done so early enough, the consequences for the Allied landing could have been catastrophic. By the time the division's armor actually moved toward the coast, it was late afternoon on June 6. And even then, a remarkable event happened that seemed to come from the hand of fate itself. As German Panzer IV tanks approached the coast between the British Sword and Juno beaches, actually reaching a point where they could see the English Channel, hundreds of Allied gliders began landing behind them, cutting their supply lines and threatening encirclement. The German tank commanders, suddenly aware that they were in danger of being trapped, pulled back. The one moment when German armor actually reached the coast on June 6, 1944, and they retreated because of gliders landing behind them. The beachhead was secure. Von Luck spent the rest of D-Day fighting his own desperate battle east of the Orne, trying to push British paratroopers back across the river and deny them the bridgehead. He was severely hampered by Allied naval gunfire. The warships offshore were devastating anything that moved in the open. He couldn't mass his forces without being shelled. He couldn't maneuver without air attacks, but he fought. That's what stands out about von Luck in account after account from this period. While the German command system was paralyzed and confused, while Rommel was in Germany visiting his wife on her birthday. While Hitler slept and his staff debated whether to wake him, von Luck was fighting. Making decisions, improvising, attacking when he could, withdrawing when he had to. By June 9, his force was redesignated Kampfgruppe von Luck, a battle group built around his regiment that would spend the next weeks fighting the British and Canadians east of Caen in one of the most difficult defensive battles of the Normandy campaign. And then came Operation Goodwood, July 18, 1944. British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery launched Operation Goodwood, the largest British tank attack of the entire war. Hundreds of tanks from 3 armored divisions rolled south from the Allied bridgehead, aimed at breaking through the German lines east of Caen. Before the tanks moved, the Allies unleashed what von Luck described as the most terrifying experience of the entire war, a carpet bombing by over 2,000 Allied aircraft, dropping their bombs on the German positions in a pattern so dense it turned the landscape into a moonscape. Von Luck wrote about watching 62-ton Tiger tanks being thrown through the air and landing upside down by the force of the explosions. His command post was buried, his regiment was shattered. He himself was briefly stunned and disoriented. Then the British tanks came, hundreds of them rolling over the churned earth. And this is where one of the most remarkable moments of Hans von Luck's war occurred. Driving toward his front line, trying to organize a defense against the advancing British armor, von Luck spotted a Luftwaffe anti-aircraft battery, 88 flak guns, the most effective anti-tank weapons Germany possessed. They were pointed at the sky as per their orders. Their orders were to engage enemy aircraft, not enemy tanks. Von Luck ordered the battery commander to engage the British tanks with the 88s. The battery commander, a young Luftwaffe captain, refused. He was under orders to engage aircraft. He had no authorization to use his guns against ground targets. Von Luck drew his service pistol, leveled it at the captain's head, and said, according to his own account, something to the effect of, "Either you're going to be a dead man right now, or you're going to earn yourself a medal." The captain made the obvious choice. The 88mm guns swung toward the British tanks, and for several critical hours that day, those guns held the British advance long enough for what remained of the German line to stabilize. Von Luck later recommended the captain for a decoration. He received one. The Battle of Normandy lasted until late August 1944. For von Luck and his Kampfgruppe, it was 8 weeks of continuous fighting, attacking, withdrawing, attacking again, always outnumbered. Always under Allied air superiority that made any movement in daylight an invitation to destruction. By August, the situation had become catastrophic. The Allied breakout, Operation Cobra, had shattered the German lines in the west. General Patton's Third Army was racing through the gaps, moving faster than German forces could react. The entire German army in Normandy was in danger of being encircled, the Falaise Pocket. August 1944, German forces from a dozen divisions were trapped in a shrinking pocket as British, Canadian, Polish, and American forces closed in from 3 sides. Inside the pocket, 100,000 German soldiers, thousands of vehicles, the wreckage of the German army in France. Von Luck was one of the lucky ones. His unit found itself outside the pocket when the trap closed, escaping the destruction that consumed so many others. But the men and formations he had fought alongside for months weren't all so fortunate. The Falaise Pocket was the end of the German army in France. After the war, Hans von Luck did something unusual for a former German officer. He talked to the men who had fought against him. Not defensively, not bitterly, openly, with genuine professional respect and something that grew into real friendship. Through historian Stephen Ambrose, whose books D-Day and Pegasus Bridge brought von Luck's story to American audiences, he was connected with the British officers of the 6th Airborne Division, who had been his opponents on D-Day, including Major John Howard, the man who led the coup de main operation to capture Pegasus Bridge, the very bridge that von Luck had been trying to recapture on the morning of June 6. Howard had held that bridge through the night against German counterattacks that included elements of von Luck's regiment. These two men, the British major who held the bridge and the German major who tried to take it back, became friends. They attended military lectures together. They walked the Normandy battlefields together, standing at the same spots where they had tried to kill each other in 1944. Von Luck also became a regular speaker at the British Staff College, helping to train a new generation of British officers by sharing the German perspective on the battles they studied. He brought to those lectures something invaluable, the honest account of what it felt like to be on the other side of D-Day, to see it coming, to understand it, and to be stopped from responding by a command system that couldn't function at the moment history demanded it most. So let's come back to the question that makes this story so extraordinary. What if the answer had been yes? What if, when von Luck called at 1 in the morning on June 6 and asked for permission to attack the British paratroopers, what if Feuchtinger had said go? What if the Panzer reserves had been released in the first 2 hours before the beaches filled with men and machines? Military historians have debated this question for 80 years. The consensus is not that Germany would necessarily have won. The Allied operation was too well planned, too well resourced, and too well executed to be defeated by any single counterattack. But in the first hours before the beachhead was consolidated, the balance was genuinely precarious. At Omaha Beach, the situation was desperate for most of the morning. British paratroopers at Pegasus Bridge were hanging on by their fingernails. A determined armored counterattack at the right moment in the right place could have changed the equation in ways that would have cost the Allies enormously, in time, in lives, potentially in the beachhead itself. Instead, the panzers sat motionless, Hitler slept, the chain of command seized up at the worst possible moment. And the men on the beaches, American, British, Canadian, who were dying in the surf and the sand and climbing the bluffs at terrible cost, they got the time they needed to make the beachhead irreversible. Hans von Luck saw D-Day first, he understood it first, He called for permission to respond before it was too late, and his own command system stopped him. That's not just the story of one officer. It's the story of why D-Day succeeded, not just because of what the Allies did, though what they did was extraordinary, but because of what Germany failed to do in the moments when it still might have mattered. The longest day wasn't just long for the men landing on the beaches. It was long for the man who watched them come, picked up a telephone, and heard the answer that changed the war.